it was really put into context when I was making this because there's like a whole book on each of the planes, right? Like the sagittal plane, the coronal plane. All we're going to do is talk about what they are today and how they relate to movement and what movements could fit inside of them. But there are whole like textbooks about it. We don't need to go that deep. We just don't need to go deep enough so that you guys are like, that's how you guys are going to be able to scale movements on the fly and honor the movement, hit the right muscles. The intention is just understanding what we're trying to achieve with the movement based on the planes, the joint angles, all that stuff, right? So, I want to draw something for you guys. I want you guys to tell me what this is. You guys know what that is?
An angle.
It is an angle. Yep. Anything else?
90-degree angle.
No. Well, maybe.
Oh, the baseball diamond.
Let me make it less than
There you go. That's a good one.
Oh, there's first, third, second.
Yes, it still looks like a 90-degree angle. Stop looking like a 90-degree angle. Yeah. That's my 90-degree angle. 45-degree angle. Okay. And I guess technically, Monica over here, she might make me do this better, but I should probably be another color so you can see it. Okay. So we just got to understand this is an angle, right? When you close an angle, the 2 points get closer. When you open an angle, the 2 points get further. Your body has angles all over it, right? So the arm is a pretty easy one to see. This is a very open angle. This is a very closed angle, right? Everyone see it? Your knee, same thing, closed, open. Your hip, this one's harder to see, but I'm standing in a very open angle, 180 degrees, I think, right? I bend over, boom, close the angle. That is called hip flexion, right? Did you guys get a chance to look at any of this? Cool. If you didn't, I was good with saying a couple weeks because I sent it out very last minute. So a joint is also called an articulation. So if you hear the word articulation, you know that they're talking about joints. And feel free to stop me anytime and ask any questions, right? Articulation also means what? Do you guys know?
To clearly define speech.
It does. What else? Also means to move. So articulation is also to move. So that's another definition of it. Yeah. Okay. So an articulation is where two or more bones meet to allow movement. Joints are a vital part of the skeletal system. If we didn't have joints, we couldn't move. We couldn't do all the things we're able to do. We couldn't climb, run, hike, jump, swim, do CrossFit without joints. There's lots of kinds of joints. So there's like hinge joints and ball and socket joints like the hip and shoulder. The shoulder, people say, is not a true ball and socket because the hip like actually sits inside of something. The shoulder is kind of like this, and it has muscles holding it in. And in the future, we're going to be going over the different kinds of joints. Not important to do today. But the main ones you're going to be looking at as a coach, and this is where I'm going to say developing your coach's eye and giving you something to focus on when you're looking at someone to see form errors, is looking at things like the neck, the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the spine, hips, the knees, and the ankles. And actually, I like to go backwards when I'm looking at someone. I start with looking at the feet and ankles. I go up to the knees, hips, shoulders, right? Like that's usually how I look at someone when I'm coaching them. And what are the planes of movement? So this is where it gets a little fun because I think this took me this took me years to understand fully. And I probably don't understand it as fully as I think I do, but I understand it fully enough to teach you. So we have our man right here. His name is Frederick. You guys know Bluey's name before you called him Bluey? Horrible, right? Frederick. We saved this guy. Okay. So if we drew a line down his center, that would be the sagittal plane. And it would divide his body into a left side and a right side. So we went over anatomical position last week, so our man is in an anatomical position. We draw a line right through the middle of him. It's not exactly through the middle, but pretend it is, right? So movements that occur in that plane would be, I used to think it's not the left and right movements, that's the next plane we're going to do, but it would be him acting on this line. So it would be him bending forward, right? So then I have a big line through me, my midline, right? I'd be like this. That's a sagittal movement. If I go this way, that's a sagittal movement. What exercises do you think fall into there? Or just throw things out.
Squat. Good morning.
Walking, yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning, yeah. Squatting, yeah.
Yeah, hinging.
Hinging, yes, absolutely, right? Anything that's gonna happen here, just where I'm like lined up straight, right? What about, so the next plane is called, oh, and another, well, I guess we'll get into that in a second. We'll just start with that. I don't want to jump ahead. So the coronal plane, this will be harder to draw, but it would be as if there was a thing slicing our guy from the side, right? The coronal, not coronal, like corona, and the frontal plane are the same thing. I think there's a slight difference in like, there's some like nuance, but for all purposes they're basically the same thing. And that would be going, like I said, from the side, and it would be movements that have to do on the side, right? So you could do like a side lunge. I don't know, can anyone else think of other sideways movements? Side shuffle? Yeah.
Grapevines.
Grapevines?
Yeah, the like when we do kettlebell, like we do.
Side
Yeah,
bend? Yeah,
side
so I
bends.
just did one, huh? Yeah, so those would be those kinds of movements. So one of the biggest criticisms that CrossFit gets is you only do sagittal and frontal plane movements. No one ever does any transverse movements, which is the next plane. And it's written down here as the axial plane, and I didn't notice that, but axial, transverse, same thing. So transverse plane is if I had, and I'm gonna draw this one. Oh, actually I do. I need another color. Lime green, this is your time to shine. One time you're useful. So this would be a square. I mean, pretend that's the giant square, just like the red one. Dividing the body into lower and upper halves, right? And that's where twisting happens. So again, it's like these lines are the lines you're moving on. Just like the sagittal is flexion and extension, and then I guess this would be lateral flexion for the frontal one. The transverse one is like we're doing Russian twist, so we're twisting on this giant square that's around me, dividing my upper and lower body. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys see it?
The ball slam you went to.
A ball
Side to
slam,
side.
if it's rotational, yeah, if it's rotational, you're going from, yeah, because you're moving on that square, right? Imagine that square is here, boom, if it's a rotational one. If it's this way, what plane is that? Sagittal, right? Because I'm moving in a straight line, right? So, yeah, so, the reason, so it's funny because the reason we don't do a lot of transverse plane movements in CrossFit, the CrossFit argument for it is because they're not as power producing. And the main objective we're after in CrossFit is learning how to apply and develop power across different modalities, different time domains, different scenarios, right? And so it's not that they shouldn't be in there. This has been what I've always thought is like, everyone goes like, well, CrossFit's missing transfer stuff. I'm just gonna go start my own fitness modality, include more twisting stuff. And it's like, cool, why not just throw it into the warm-up or the skill work, right? Like, we could include it there. And CrossFit says that too, like a Turkish get-up typically should be in a workout, even though I put them in workouts. It should be more in the slower portion of class or an accessory portion of class, but in the main workout of the day, we're after power. So that's
Where
kind
does the Turkish get up go in?
in this.
Yeah.
It would be a transverse plane movement because your shoulder the whole time it rotates a lot. So
Yeah.
you're starting on the ground, you're cooking up, let's see if I can show you. So having the giant square over me, and I'm going like this. You can see the rotation of the shoulder and my trunk.
Yep.
Right? So boom, and then back down.
It's almost kind of like you're moving through many planes, but you're.
Yeah, it's a multi-planar movement. Yep. And yeah, and there's whole methodologies built off of the plane, like the transverse plane. Like the Weck method. You guys know David Weck? Have you heard of that name?
Yep.
Yeah, so he's like his trainer that's like the Bosu ball guy, right? Like, I think he invented the Bosu, I want to say. If not, he uses it a lot in his training. He also does like sandbag and just like unconventional stuff. And like, it's really funny because what you'll learn is in fitness, everyone's trying to come up with a unique methodology, but the things that work are the things that are tried and true. So they will be like, well, here's the problem, this is the solution, but they create the problem and it gets marketed and you go like, oh yeah, like if we're not doing transverse plane, I'm like, and I don't think you shouldn't do it, but I don't know if you should do it solely or focus on it as much as other things, right? Like I still believe in CrossFit wholeheartedly, but yeah, it's interesting. It's just funny watching like the people, because a lot of people don't know. That's the thing. Most people out there have no idea any of this stuff and don't know what's best for them. So if someone tells them something like, oh yeah, it makes sense, then they believe it and they buy in. But when you have an expert come in, someone's like studied, and then they address them on Instagram, it's pretty funny to watch. So anyways. All right, so our word bank. I put a word bank up there just so you guys can see the things we're going to be talking about. So joint is also called an articulation. You know what that is now. You're made up of it. It's anywhere bone and bone meet in the body. That's a joint. And the sagittal plane, lying down the middle of us, we're moving on that line. The frontal plane, lying through the side of us, we're moving on that line. And the transverse plane, lying through the middle of us this way, and we're moving on that line, doing twisty things, right? And then, that was kind of a weird movement. I kind of did like 2 points there. And then flexion and extension. So flexion means to bend, right? So you could think of, you could basically put the word bend in place of flexion or flex anytime you see it. So if you talk about knee flexion, what are you doing?
Bending your knee.
Bending your knee. If you talk about hip flexion, what are you doing?
Closing the angle of your hip.
Yeah, closing the angle of your hip. What about, now this is a weird one, this is a good one. So shoulder flexion. This is interesting. Yeah, why is this shoulder flexion? Yeah, why is this shoulder extension? Yeah. So I looked it up, which was really cool. This is really making me look stuff up like this so I could answer for you guys. So I wrote it down somewhere. So shoulder flexion. So you guys know what makes up your shoulder. We're gonna go into this, I think, next week or the week after, but we're gonna talk just about the shoulder. But there are a few bones. Do you guys know any of the bones that make up the shoulder? Think about, I guarantee you know at least one of them. No, not muscles. So bones, bony structures. So what's this called?
Collarbone?
Clavicle for sure.
Collarbone?
Yeah.
Yep, and also clavicle, right? Clavicle would be the anatomical name. And then your shoulder blade, right, is another bone. Scapula. And your scapula has a part of it that comes around and meets the collarbone. That's called your acromion, and that comes from the scapula. And so the scapula is I don't know if it actually looks like this, but I imagine it looks like a hand, kind of like an upside down hand, and then it has this bony process that comes around right here and attaches to this long collarbone. You guys know that they break people's collarbones in prison, I think it was World War II, prisoner of war, because once you do, you kind of lose the ability to really use your arm. Your collarbone is so important, and it's really painful when they do that. So hopefully no one ever does that again, but yeah. So acromion, collarbone, and then the big bone in here. Does anyone know what this big bone is? It's not funny.
It's not the funny bone.
That's a tip.
What's the medical term?
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it.
It's not funny, it's humorous.
Ah,
Don't worry.
that was a funny joke.
We're good. Thank you. I'm glad we got this on camera. So anyways, so the humerus is the big bone inside of there. So those bones make up your shoulder. Your shoulder's all of that, right? And there's more structures and stuff that we'll learn about next week. But so knowing the humerus and the acromion, right? when you do flexion, you decrease the angle. So we have this thing coming off here and this thing coming off here. Pretend there's two bones like this, right? Right here that you can see. When I go like this, it's gonna close the angle. And then when I go like this, it's gonna open the angle. See my fingers get further apart and closer together? So that's what they're using when I do shoulder flexion extension, which I never knew because it actually doesn't make sense because you'd think it'd be the other way around, right? But they chose those two bones. And actually with the, oh yeah, no, it is the same. There's another area where they chose like two different things. It's the ankle, that's what it is. And it's like, why would you do that? And we're gonna talk about that shortly. But that's flexion and extension. And also another cool thing is when we do like a hollow rock, we are in global flexion. Is it global flexion? Yeah. And then when we go this way and we do a Superman, we're in global extension. When we're on the pull-up bar, same thing, right? We can go flexion, extension, flexion, extension. It's like our whole body is one big joint. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any questions so far? No? Cool. Does it seem like a lot? Does it seem okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So now we get into abduction and adduction. So add and abd, they sound the same, right? So how do you tell the difference? Really easy. What is the one thing as a parent you never want to happen?
Abduction.
Yeah, you never want your kid to get taken away, right? You never want a kidnapping or an abduction, all the same word, right? It's an easy way of remembering that abduction means away, right? Adduction, and then I'll see people all the time will go, yeah, abduction or ADD, I don't know if they say ADD, but I've heard abduction before when people are talking as a way of clarifying what they're saying, because adduction means the opposite or to come together, and add has ADD in it, so it's like plus, right? So that's another way to think about it. So abduction means to take away from the midline, so that midline here, and then adduction means to go closer to the midline. This would actually be adduction, right? So let's see, what else I want to do with that. So you could do the arm, you could do the leg, those would be like the hip, those would be abduction and adduction. That's really important to know because when we're squatting, what do we want when we're squatting? Do I want adduction?
No.
I want abduction. Cool. And I just learned this the other day, thanks to Samantha saying something on Instagram, that when people are squatting, like they had a video of Tia Toomey, there's something called a adductor whip. And so when they go down to the very bottom of the squat, and like let's say they do a squat clean, and they're coming up and their knees come in, that's because their adductor is engaging so hard that it makes the knees pull in, and of course they want to push back out. But that's what that is. However, you don't want to do that on the way down. So like let's say they're squat clean and they're going like this, that's not good. But if they do that as a consequence of the adductor engaging, then it's not a bad thing.
So it's not so bad if you're going up.
Yeah.
It's worse if you're going down.
Yeah, you don't want that when you're going down. So it's like you're trying to, like the term shoot a cannon from a canoe, right? It's like really crappy form. You're trying to catch 100, 200, 300 pounds of crappy form, not good. If that happens because you're going on the way up and it just happens naturally, fine, right? And yeah, but we could talk about that. That's probably more, I probably shouldn't have. Does that make it confusing or is that good? Okay, good. I have to hold back info sometimes because I just want to go off into the matrix.
Okay.
Cool. So next is, you guys understand abduction and adduction?
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole muscle group in here called adductors, or adductors. So what do you think they do? ADD. Someone besides Michael.
Let's just say comment.
You just showed us.
Guess they move closer to the middle, to the midline.
Yeah, they're in your legs, so what do you think they pull closer?
Your whole knees.
Your leg, yeah,
Legs,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's their job, right? And so like this is cool because then the next time we do an adductor plank in class, you guys will know why we're doing an adductor plank, right? And what we're working on. You know that plank where we squeeze the bench with our legs? That's what that is.
Or adductor
Oh, we have a hip one.
Or adductor rock
Which
backs
one's
or
that?
stretching muscles.
So I was thinking that was on like this, right?
Yep.
Oh, that, yeah.
That's the rock back. Yeah, so,
So
you're,
that's-
so you're stretching that inner leg muscle group.
So this is adductor or
Adductor.
Adductor.
we're back. Okay.
Now your leg is abducted because it's pushed away, but you're stretching the inside. And eventually you'll learn the reason that your leg is abducted to stretch the inside is because muscles work in pairs. So if one side is doing something and the other side is doing something else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, really good.
All right, circumduction. So circumduction, have you guys heard of that? Anyone? No?
Yes.
So we have the kidnapping, we have the addition, and then circ. What does circ usually refer to? Circle. Yeah. So circumduction is a circular movement of a joint. Right. So the shoulder does it, the hips do it. I don't know if technically the ankle does it. I think it does, but I don't know. I didn't actually look that up. But yeah, it combines flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. It's in all of them at once to make a circular motion. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. And then rotation. This is one of my favorites. So rotation is the movement of a limb on its own axis. Fully transparent with you, I'm very insecure when it comes to math, algebra, all of that stuff. Like good at like gym math, money math. This, like, I'm a little nervous. I could be wrong. We'll have Monica verify because I feel like she knows the maths. But I think this is the axis because you're not, well, you don't need to change your joint angle in order to rotate. I could rotate here, I could rotate here, I could rotate here, I could rotate here. But if you guys just hold out your arm, your thumbs in front of you, so this would be like a neutral position of the shoulder, because even though we're looking at our hands, this is the thing we're going to move. If you turn your thumbs to the outside, that is external rotation. You should feel like your lats engage if you're really turning to the outside. It should feel like your shoulder is really stable. Now we're going to go the other way to the inside. That is internal rotation. It should feel like you're less tight, right? So that's important to know because I've seen it in here so many times. It just actually happened with one of the ladies, Sam is trained that just joined the gym. We did like her shoulder flexion test and she felt like a pinch in her medial deltoid, so pinch right here. And I asked Sam, did she try cueing her to turn her thumbs to the outside? Because remember, we got all those bones we talked about earlier right here. And a lot of the time when someone is internally rotated for whatever reason, could be life circumstances, like just how they use their arms and shoulders every day, then, or just not being strong, whatever it is, then there are things that will get pinched when you go into shoulder flexion. And if you turn your thumb to the outside, externally rotate, you create more space down here. And it also stabilizes your shoulders by using the muscles that hold the head of the humerus there. It causes them to tighten up, right, and create torque around the shoulder. So that way you kind of have a pat shoulder, a strong shoulder, and not a shoulder that's not supported by anything, right? Does that make sense? So that's important to understand for rotation. Also, I've seen in squatting, so another thing that rotates, just like in the picture, is your hips, right? And here's a picture of a lady in external rotation of the hip and internal rotation of the hip. And both are important for movements, like squatting. I think you need both for that. And for some people, it helps to, like when they're squatting and they feel something here, it helps to tell them to push their knees out more, or do like Cossack squats and work on that. So rotation is really important to understand, and just knowing that the hip can rotate and the shoulder can rotate. And internal rotation, I used to think like, oh, it's just a bad thing, but you need it. You need it as much as you need external rotation. But I think the difference in my experience so far is most people I've trained usually lack external rotation versus internal rotation when it comes to things. But I have read a lot of stuff online where people say they've encountered the opposite, so it might just be the people I've gotten over the years.
I always wondered, you said Cossack squat. Is it Cossack or Cossack? I thought it was Cossack.
Cossack.
Is it Cossack?
Cossack. Cossack.
It's Cossack,
Yeah.
No,
Cossack?
I'm saying Cossack or,
only because of just purely, I don't know how, just hearing people say it, just over the years, I've always heard Cossack squat.
Cossack.
I always heard
And then when you
Cossack.
think of the military terminology, it's the same as Cossack is when how they pronounce it, so I'm wondering if it's the same thing. I don't know if you're, just saying.
Yeah, I usually say Cossack. And then, well, I mean, it could be, but Cossack is also people in Russian. Do you know that?
Yeah.
All right, warrior people. So, anyways, more questions? No? Okay. Pronation and supination. So, from what I found, I didn't realize this before. The pronation and supination definition. So, pronation means rotation of the forearm so the palm faces backwards or downwards. So, I should do this, right? This would be pronation, and this would be supination. Now, I didn't realize this, but in the foot, I couldn't find anything that validated that it was also pronation and supination in the foot. I did do something that eversion and inversion are called pronation and supination in the foot. So if you think about the foot, and this is a really cool thing if you guys will notice, our arms are almost like little legs that are up on top of our upper body, right? And what I mean by that is like we have our hamstrings back here, which one of your hamstrings is called the biceps femoris. We also have our biceps right here, right? So that's an interesting aside. We have the triceps, and these are almost like quads. And we have the elbow that's kind of like the knee, right? Have you ever thought about that? And then our forearms are kind of like a calf. This is like a whole other foot because we evolved from being four-legged creatures, right? So that's an interesting aside. But what was I going to say? So pronation, supination. The foot is eversion and eversion is to the outside, inversion is to the inside. So in, out is evert, right? But also supination of the foot is also that, and then pronation of the foot is also inversion. And I think the difference in the terms has to do with what plane you're describing in when it comes to the foot. And that's a big difference. But you can read online, there's all kinds of stuff about pronation and supination. Not all of it is good, so don't go down a rabbit hole unless you know who you're reading from. And then also prone and supine have to do with like supine is laying on with your stomach showing, right? Kind of like your forearm is up, it's all this side of the body. And then prone is lying face down, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So supination, pronation are important to understand. So if we have a supinated ring row, what do you think we're doing with our arms? Yeah. Yep. And if we're doing a supine leg lower, what do you think we're doing with our whole body?
Supine leg lower.
Yep. So remember, what did I just say supine was for a position? How are we lying?
On our back now.
Yep, on our back. So if we're lying on our back and then doing a leg lower, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you lower?
So you'd have your hands like this and then legs up
Like
and then lower.
a lift.
Uh-huh.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was,
And then, yeah.
Yep.
never mind. Got
But
it.
you guys will see that a lot in like some of the videos we put out, or like prone, Y's, T's, and I's. So if I was doing a prone, Y, T, and I, what position would I be in?
No.
On your belly.
No.
On my belly on the
Yeah.
floor, yeah, right? And then plantar flexion and dorsiflexion, Stephen. So plantar flexion is the movement of the foot downward, so pointing your foot, right? So you can think plantar, point, and then dorsiflexion is the movement of the foot upward, is when lifting the toes off the ground. So this is dorsiflex, this is plantar flex. And I don't know if you guys were gonna ask, but I wanted to ask why is it both flexed? Why is one not extension? Right? And the reason for that is this is where, like I said, they chose two different landmarks. So dorsiflexion decreases the angle between the top of the foot and the shin, so that's what they choose to measure that, so that's flexed that way. And then plantar flexion decreases the angle between the heel and the calf. So this is flexed this way, which is really doesn't really make sense compared to the other joints, right? But that's why.
It's the most common football injury for running backs, plantar fasciitis.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's whenever they're out, because of how they flex their knee.
Oh yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. That's good stuff.
Fantasy football, they get the injury happens. It's always plantar fasciitis, running backs are out.
All right. So real quickly, I want you guys to get up and close your eyes. Okay, then stand off the floor. All right, closing your eyes. I want you guys to demonstrate hip flexion for me. Stay in the bottom of hip flexion. Cool. Okay, open your eyes. All you guys are correct. That is hip flexion. Yeah, cool.
It was funny.
Yeah, okay. I didn't expect that. That's good.
It was actually pretty good.
Okay, and then go ahead and close your eyes again. Show me lateral flexion of the right side. Lateral flexion.
Lateral flexion.
Lateral spine flexion, I should say. Sorry, lateral spine flexion. Yeah, I should start again. Lateral. Yep. Oh, you're anterolateral right now.
What was it?
You were anterolateral. You were the
We're still close.
I had to so
Oh, I know,
figure
I'm
out where I am in
You got
space.
it, coach.
Oh,
You're
okay.
going the opposite way. You're going. That was the extension of that side. Hi, Sam. But that was close. Okay. And then last question I have for you guys. What do you think hyperextension is? Yeah. But so definition wise, we know extension is opening the angle of the joint. Hyperextension is opening the angle of the joint too far, more than it's built for, right? So when we do that, then that's when tissue damage occurs. So like that's why like when people are like jerks is a great one, right? Is everyone hyperextends their back warming up, and they do that and they're damaging those tissues, right? Because it's the passive structures, which we'll wear it out in the future, but it's like the bones and the whatever holds the bones and joints together there, it's just getting smushed, and so it's causing damage. We don't want to hyperextend. Extension is fine, hyperextension is not fine.
So you can hyperextend like your knee, right?
You could,
push
some
your knee
people
back
can.
too
I mean,
far.
I think it kind of, yeah, you can, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
You could probably hyperextend everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
to what degree really depends on the person. Like some people are hypermobile, so they could hyperextend and not feel any damage, but
Right.
if they're doing it under load, then they can get damage. So you're really fun when you have a hypermobile person and you're trying to teach them like, no, actually stop a little bit shy of fully going like that in a snatch or something, and not before. Cool.
Hyperthyroidism too. What happened? Regulated.
That's an overactive thyroid. You have hyperthyroidism?
I have to take levothyroxine every morning.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, what do you guys think? Good?
Yeah.
Any questions? All right.
Lots of
Cool.
questions.
Happy Saturday.
Thanks,
Well,
sir.
you can ask me questions. You can ask questions in
Yeah, I
Slack
will.
too.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask questions in like coach development, like Slack channel, because the more questions you ask, then if anyone else has those questions, then they get the answers.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah.
Wait, I thought you were over there. I was trying to get away.